Every mickle make a muckle. Every mickle make a muckle. This is a Jamaican proverb that my grandmother always says to me. What does it mean? It means every little counts. Every little thing that we do, it all counts. And so I think it's fitting to start this way to say to you, hey, every little that you do, showing up here to stand in solidarity with us, to participate, to put our heads together, it counts. And it is making waves and it's making changes, and we appreciate it. So welcome to Berkeley City College's first ever Solidarity in Mental Health Summit. Woo! Yes! It is a great day, and we will kick things off in, I guess, the fitting way. I'm introducing a lady to you whose commitment and passion for social justice has like super deep roots, like even deeper than mine. It stems from hearing stories of her granddad in the Philippines as a village leader and how her mother always just cared about the well-being of other people. She's been involved in social justice movements locally and at the state level, even before she became the captain of this here Berkeley City College ship 2 years ago. I'm speaking about none other than our president, Miss Rowena Tomaneng.
Welcome. It's my pleasure to welcome all of you to Berkeley City College. And first, I want to express my deep appreciation to Janine Greer, who's over there, who really was the driving force for coordinating and organizing this very first Mental Health in Solidarity Summit here at BCC. And I also want to thank all of the speakers that we have today and all of the participants, because we know that your time is very important, and we appreciate that you're here with us sharing your perspectives, your strategies to build this new community of practice for our students, their families, and our communities. There has been so many different painful events happening in the past weeks. So I think it's appropriate that we acknowledge what's been going on in our communities nationally in the past weeks. And so there has been a lot of pain, sadness, and trauma that many of us are carrying at this moment. In the past couple of weeks, we've heard about proposed changes to federal policy around the definition of gender, which is one in a series of attacks on the humanity and identity of trans, intersex, gender nonconforming, and non-binary people. We've had hate crimes against Jewish groups taking the form of the massacre that happened in a place of worship, all because that community was working with the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society to help integrate refugees from all cultural backgrounds. These events, in addition to others, such as the brutal killing of an elderly Black couple committed to serving their community in Kentucky, and most recently, the mass shooting in Thousand Oaks that just killed 12 people, including several young college students. These are deeply painful, and they should be a social justice concern for all of us. These attacks point to a harmful mindset prevalent in our country that uphold long-standing and oppressive systems embedded in our nation's history: white supremacy, transphobia, patriarchy, capitalism, the interplay between and the resulting violence on our communities. And so, as educators and community leaders, we need to continue our efforts to change this harmful mindset. We need to wake up, stand up, and lift our communities. That is the call for today in terms of the summit. And then with that, I'd like to leave you with one of my sources of inspiration. I'm very much inspired by the decades of work that Grace Lee Boggs did in the Detroit community. And she said, "We urgently need to bring our communities the limitless capacity to love, serve, and create for and with each other." She also said, "The only way to survive is by taking care of each other." And so with that, I really wish all of us a very meaningful conference today. I'm looking forward to the speakers, the dialogue, listening to what others are doing in terms of strategies and working together. So with that, I'll go ahead and hand it back over to our MC.
All right. The only way we can survive is if we take care of each other. So thank you very much to our amazing president. And I think that is the perfect segue to introduce our keynote speaker to you. This is the associate director and co-founder of Ryse. She guides the implementation of healing-centered practices grounded in racial justice and liberation across program areas. She develops, promotes, and advocates for policies, practices, and research that enliven healing and justice across fields and sectors in which Ryse works. The purpose of her work is to contribute to movements, communities, and legacies of liberation and honor ancestors who fought for her existence and to forge a world that is just and gentle for future generations. She earned a master's degree in public health, and she now serves as adjunct faculty at San Francisco State University. Ladies and gentlemen, please make welcome Kanwarpal Dhaliwal.
Well, good morning again. I'm really feeling just reminded from what we just experienced together of when the spirit connects to the vagus nerve or the amygdala, right? And this morning running around feeling like all the ways I'm disintegrated, thinking about all these things I gotta do, I gotta be, what am I gonna say? Am I gonna show up right? And then the drum starts and I feel it. And all of a sudden it goes up, right? And it connects. And I'm like, oh, this is the integration. Why it's so critical to have so many different ways to be in space, right? And to connect. And so I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you. I want to especially actually thank Janine, my sister Janine, who has entrusted me in our organization to be able to share some space with you and some time with you. We met almost a little over 2 years ago in a really sort of tender, profound space. And I feel like it's always important to acknowledge the people who bring you in space. So thank you, Janine. And I also need to acknowledge the righteous ancestors who fought for my survival, for our survival. And I need to also thank the young people of Richmond, the young people of color of Richmond, who actually organized for me to be here over 20 years ago and organized to shift the conditions of violence and trauma in their communities, knowing they would never benefit directly from what we've created. That's 14, 15, 16-year-olds building legacy, right, for a 44-year-old. So I always have to be reminded and thankful that those young people allowed me and again entrusted me to be here today. Building solidarity, right? When I think about solidarity and mental health, when we think about distress, disorder, trauma, it is about that isolation, the disintegration at so many levels. And solidarity is about that integration, that connectivity on all those levels. And I'm going to share some of our learnings, some of our own experience about what it means to sort of be connected, to address historical trauma, and really enlivening liberation and legacy of liberation. But to do that, I also want to offer that solidarity so much has to be grounded in the sense of beloved community. And we really believe as an organization that anywhere and everywhere we go, where we're invited, where we show up, where we agitate, where we organize, where we heal, that our purpose is also to cultivate a sense of beloved community. So there's some familiar faces I see in this room, there's new faces I see in this room, and it's perfect. This is exactly what it's supposed to be right now, and really wanting to hold that. So towards that, I wanted to offer some quotes that have helped us sort of understand what it means to be responsible to and to be given a sense of beloved community. So I actually believe there's some folks in here with loud, resounding voices. So I'm going to ask if someone could read the first quote that's up there. So here we are, beloveds. We have a whole day together. Hopefully more comes from this. This is just the first summit, so I just assume and trust more to come. So I want to also offer, because I'm up here, like for those who don't know, and maybe those who do know me, just where I come from and the community I'm here sort of in stewardship with and representing, and that's the Ryse Youth Center in Richmond. Yeah, you can, yeah, thank you. So I have a 2-minute video you're gonna see. It's called our Ryse commercial. So I wanna show it to you so you can really get a sense of who we are and what we do and who Ryse is about.
When I'm inside the Ryse, I just feel really safe and comfortable.
There's a place where you can just come and like not have to deal with stuff that's happening out the street or like violence in the community.
It's a happy environment. Everybody's nice to everybody. It's all love.
Everybody here is positive. Everybody's so creative here. Being around that type of stuff, especially younger people that's creative, makes you want to be more creative.
We get so many different people from so many different walks of life and so many different experiences coming to one space.
I wanted to rap, record music, and have my own CD and everything. Ryse has actually made it a reality.
I do film, so I always ask people for advice that do film here. You should come here to do something that you're not doing at home.
I started off really bad, and once I started coming to Ryse, they helped me with school, they helped me with my career. They gave me a place to be where I feel like I can belong.
Everything here, we take in a restorative justice approach. They don't look at you for what you've done in the past or anything like that.
I became an intern, so that kind of changed the way I was in school. I started getting my grades up by going to just doing homework and making an ed and career plan.
We have a youth organizing club where a whole bunch of youth from the center or from the community can come together and pitch campaigns on how they want to change whatever it is in the community.
Ryse's goal is to empower youth to make a change.
I ultimately believe Ryse is here to expand young people's minds and show them what else the world has to offer.
People should come to Ryse because there's something for everybody at Ryse. I feel like there's a space for every single person in the community to be able to get something out of Ryse.
Ryse has so many things it can teach you. It can give you so many different jewels.
Ryse definitely helped me realize that I could actually do something, that I could accomplish what I had in my mind.
This video was created about 3 years ago, and actually some of our members and our staff, we have about a third of our staff have come up through our membership. They came to us and said there's way too many adults in the video we have right now. It's 6.5 minutes long, which we know now is like, a documentary series, right? So they said we want to create our own video because one, we know that you all are out there going and talking to folks about Ryse. We can't be with you all the time. We don't want to be with you all the time. But also, they wanted to make sure that they had some counter to the dominant, harmful media narratives about who they are. Because all you hear about young people of color in Richmond is about risk, right? Violence, deficiency, and they are dealing with profound conditions of trauma and distress, and they are dealing with them with immense fortitude, immense resilience, right? And struggle. Like all that's there. And so they said it was really important to be able to show not just what Ryse means to them, but who they are. Every young person in there grew up in Richmond, grew up in West County, who you saw. In our conversations with young people over the decade we've been open, almost 2 decades we've been in a process to organize Ryse, what we have learned and hear is that the media representations of young people, they said, feels just as stressful as interpersonal conflict. Right? And so as a violence prevention organization, violence intervention organization, so much of what we're sort of bound to and held by in terms of research standards, in terms of funders, is how do we change individual behavior when they feel just as stressed about Channel 2 News, Channel 4 News, CNN, So when are we going to intervene those systems and structures that are creating dehumanization and distress? And that's our work as an organization. So I talked a little bit about our context, and I'm sharing all this with you just so you know, again, who's up here, right? And again, who I'm about. And so I'm not going to go over this in depth, but I just want to share that in our community, young people have described trauma as atmospheric, right? And I think it's not too much of a stretch to say more and more folks are experiencing it this way. One thing we heard after the November 2016 election from a lot of our young people was, yeah, shit's going to be bad, but it's been bad. Right? So yeah, we see you like depressed, you're coming in all silent and sullen. And this was all the adults, like, what are we gonna do, right? And that same day, young people walked out of schools, right? They're like, F this. And that was what reminded us of what it means to sort of be motivated. And so I just wanna sort of, again, share that as an adult working in service to young people of color, what it means to be in solidarity is to be proximate, is to own my shit, is to say sorry, right? But to also show up with young people. Sometimes it's actually showing up to protect them, sometimes it's side by side, and sometimes it's backing them up. So you'll see a quote here. My experience with violence is very brutal. I grew up with violence as it were my sibling. So that sense of intimacy and connection to violence is also really, it's important for us to understand, for any of us working, again, in service to young people in communities that are structurally vulnerable. That while we're trying to maybe help a young person figure out an alternate way to engage, we also have to understand if they're disconnecting from what they're used to, that means relationships, that means friendships, that means family and kin. We have to acknowledge the loss of that too, right? And in a lot of our programs, we are taught to sort of, well, how can you get away from those other people versus how do we bring everyone along and hold that beloved community, however, wherever folks are entering. Also want to share a little bit about sort of what it feels like for young people in our community. And what I'm sharing here is actually, we did research, which we called our listening campaign. We talked to over 500 young people in our community about their experiences of violence, trauma, coping, and healing. And so what you're seeing here are some of the key findings, but we continue to inquire with young people around these findings. So it's still, what you see here is very relevant. But the impact is this sense of like hopelessness, feeling numb, right? Feeling trapped and angry, but also not knowing and not feeling like there's outlets. What young people said is we can't go to adults because you're either gonna shun us, discipline us, or call a system on us, right? When we asked what you need, they said we need adults. We need adults who care, who won't judge. So as much as they feel like they can't go to us, there's still hope for us. And that's been really important for us as an organization and for the adults who are part of the organization to really hold, respect, honor, but also work towards. Number one coping mechanism, smoking weed. We weren't surprised, but we were surprised by the magnitude of what young people said in terms of it is not about recreation, it is about numbing out and escaping. Very clear that it increases risk of engagement with law enforcement, right? But it actually feels easier to access weed than a trusted adult. So that shit we gotta like take as an organization. I can't just say you gotta change your behavior when nothing around is gonna shift. And so again, when we think about beloved community, it is about that relationship, that proximity, but it's also about how do I also name the social ecologies of violence and harm you are in, and make sure that it gets addressed. And then young people deal with a lot of stress, responsibility, isolation, lost loved ones. It makes young people feel cautious, guilty, alone, angry, and sad. When we asked, what is needed, what do you want, what do you hope for? Again, the same side of the, different side of the same coin, saying we can't go to adults, but we need to, we need you. And what a gift, right? Like, what a gift to say we can't go to you, but we're still waiting for you. And we'll be here for you. And one of the things that comes up over and over again is young people sharing with us how much they see adults suffering. We know you're stressed out. We know you're dealing with stuff. We need you to take care of it for yourselves, but also so you don't take it out on us. And you know, they didn't have to say any of that to us. They didn't know that we were going to try to take it and figure out how do we shift policies based on this information. They did it. They took the risk to share what was real for them. They said, we know we can't run the city. It's too complex, but our experience and our voices should count, especially because we're the most affected. So really, again, don't put the burden of the work on us, but make sure we're involved. Make sure you're actually creating policies, practice investments that are really based on where we are and what we need, not what you think of us or what we think you should be, right? We asked then, what does healing mean? So just saying this shit is whack, you're right, is so important, right? Because, and again, and I know that I have been trained and probably mistrained to really try to enforce and encourage compliance, right? How do you change your behavior? How do you meet this metric, right? When it actually has no sort of bearing on what's real for you, what's right for you, what's going on for you, and what's meaningful for you. When we look at sort of metrics even of wellness, of resilience, right? We've actually haven't asked the communities we're in service to what that means, right? And that resilience itself, for communities of color in this country for sure, that's not a benchmark, that's our baseline. We're here, right? What I will say is also, is that resilience can be a benchmark for communities and folks that have been structurally protected. So for white folks, for men, resilience, yeah, you need to increase your resilience to rupture the systems that protect you, right? So we have to really also understand sort of not just the social ecologies of violence, but also the ways in which structures of oppression, patriarchy, racism, homophobia, transphobia, classism play out. All of that has to happen. How exciting, right? That is so great. We're so lucky to be able to be in that purpose. Healing looks like education. If people understood their privilege and how their actions can deeply affect someone, I think it would help a lot of people who are struggling with these issues. So healing wasn't, I need to go see a therapist. 2 people said that. Doesn't mean we don't need therapists. I want you to be, I love my therapist, right? I'm grateful for her. But what it means is that there's a sense and a perception of therapy as not being an option, not being accessible, or when I'm forced into it, it's going to be about judgment and pathologizing. I'm not going to be seen. And all you're going to see is what's the disorder, not who's the human being that actually took the risk and the courage to step into this threshold. So what we hear from our young people is, yeah, we want to go to therapists. Now, 10 years later at Ryse, young people run around the hall saying, I can't talk right now, I got to go see my therapist. Didn't start that way though, right? But it was how do we build normalcy into that? And young people had to drive that forward with each other. I'm never going to tell and like yell at a young person across the hall, oh, it's time to go see your therapist. But if they want to yell it and they want to scream it, all good. I'll scream that I'm going to go see my therapist, so I can't talk right now and I need those 50 minutes. So again, it's understanding sort of that proximity and the relationship and the agency. So we're going to have a test on this at the end, okay? So, but I feel like it's important to share solidarity, mental health, beloved community. It was already said, if we don't name historical trauma, if we don't name structural oppression, if we're only looking at episodic sort of issues, we are losing so much and we are creating more harm. So what we know is trauma and distress are atmospheric, it's political, it's structural, it's historical, it's generational, it is interpersonal, it is familial, it is embodied. So then must be our healing. And so as an organization, we name this everywhere we go. I take this thing everywhere we go, one, to remind myself, but also to know that I am connected to folks, all of us in this room, working these layers to the best we can, right? Some of us are really focused on the individual interpersonal healing, but I know we're focused on it in a way that acknowledges and understands the subjugation of so many peoples this country was built and relies on, right? So when you have a young person that isn't going to class, right? Not going to school, they're about to be suspended. The first thing that I know we do, our team does, is it's not about, okay, how are we going to get you back into school? It's, so what have you been up to, right? Like, and really starting with where they are, and not assuming that school is a neutral place or a safe space to be, right? What we know now through the emerging science, that when there is trauma and stress, metabolizing that in our bodies, the movement is so critical. But when a young person is walking into a classroom at 7:56 a.m. or 8:04 a.m., there's no breakfast. Walking to school has been a bit of a terror, right? There's uncertainty in that. And then not knowing how you're going to be treated at school. So what you need to do to alleviate that kind of vigilance and distress is move around. And that's the last thing you're supposed to do in a classroom, right? So you're doing what your body needs, but you're not doing what the system needs. And that creates conflict. You're out of compliance. So as that continues to happen, you go to detention, right? And then you end up seeing a school resource officer. Then it keeps happening, and then it's the other sort of level of engagement. School to prison pipeline starts with that embodied stress that's not acknowledged, that's not understood, and that's not tended to, right? But that is historical and generational and structural. So our work then is to say, how do we create classrooms that ensure the ability to metabolize, to integrate with oneself and each other? It's the hardest work, it's the most necessary work, and again, it's a gift for all of us to be in that purpose. So I want to share this. Again, I have copies in my car. I'll bring them out at lunch if you're interested in them, and we can send them to you. But for us, it's also important that when we're talking about mental health, when we're talking about distress or trauma, that this is the frame we assert. Folks are familiar with the adverse childhood experiences? Some of us? Okay, if not, ask some of us what it is, but if not, you can look it up. It's real popular, big buzzword, lots of money going into how do we address it, how do we address it? We get asked that all the time as an organization. It's right here, right? But if we were only addressing, well, what were the things that happened to you, who did what to you, but weren't acknowledging it in this context, then again, we are remiss and we are doing more harm. And for those of us, like, I grew up in racial trauma and domestic violence, caught and cradled by it. I grew up with all my material needs met. So I was very protected in a lot of ways, also very vulnerable in a lot of ways, right? So it's all of that. And for many of us, we're in all those places, so we have to hold those places of protection and burden as well, and be really mindful, where do they show up? And how do I need to be in solidarity based on that place? Sometimes I need people to be in solidarity with me, right? They need to do more work. But sometimes oftentimes, and more as I get older and more bougie, I need to be the one who's protecting, right? And doing the work of solidarity. So I want to share just some of the things that we've come into practice. And again, I think it's how great to start the morning, how we started with movement, with dance, with the drum. Because it actually then, it really sort of lifts up the ways in which we are working in solidarity in beloved community. And I've talked about some of these, but as an organization, we lead with love and rage. We invite rage, we invite anger. We don't call our anger management. We don't need to manage it, right? It's righteous. We do need to channel it. But we can channel it with each other. Young people can co-regulate with each other when they have the space and they know that the social ecologies of violence and oppression are named and understood, right? And I also know that I think there's a quote by Bell Hooks, I'm going to say it wrong, but the rage of the oppressed is not the same as the rage of the oppressor, right? So I think we have to be really mindful about that too. Like white rage, check it, right? There is a rage that, I think is sound and important for those of us, again, in protected and privileged places to understand that, I benefit, and I benefit over others simply because of this, this, and this. There is a rage to that. but there's a very different kind of rage. And what happens is for young people of color, for people of color more and more, when we express our rage, right, it is seen as scary, you know, out of pocket. We need to be able to sort of, you know, have the respectability around how we engage. And how do we, as Dr. Ken Hardy has said often, find our voice, our voicefulness in that, knowing even there could be risk to it. Because we know there have been risks around voicing our rage and our anger. So how do we do it and take care of each other? And those who are in protected places, how do you also make sure you give space and get thick skin around it? Relationships. Everything is about relationship. There's nothing can be sort of healed without relationship. So at Ryse, you know, we meet, you know, a funder requirement of 50 young people got their resumes done, or we did 3 cohorts of what we called breaking the frame of anger management, our BFAM. So we can meet those numbers. But if no one felt connected, no one felt loved in those, right? If we got 50 resumes done, but no one feels connected to anyone, we have failed. Our outcomes have to be bigger. Our measures have to be bigger and bolder than any that are out there by conventional standards. That shit's easy when we're in relationship. It's the relationship that matters. Relationships are our programming are the platforms to build relationships, right? That's what it's about. So a young person knows if they go to the music studio, if they go to the garden, if they go to Ed and Career, if they go to counseling, that the relationship is central. Solidarity is about collective care. There's just no way that we can actually build it without tending to each other, without tending to ourselves. And so that also we know what people need, like healing is so personal just as much as it is political, right? And it's so critical that we actually, because this is how we understand collective care, is staying proximate. When we have members who have been killed, what we do is ask those most impacted, those closest, what can we do right now? Sometimes it's nothing. I just need you to keep doing business as usual, because that's what I need right now. They might come back, or we might check in the next day. Can we have a circle? We've held celebrations of life at Ryse. We've held funerals. We've held dance parties. It really has to be, it's not about here's the protocol, right? It's about what's the process, what's the inquiry we need to do so the folks most impacted feel like they're being held, tended to, and taken care of. And it's not easy, right? Because we all have our own stuff coming up too. But that idea of collective care is not just about choose from these options. It's about what's possible, what's needed, and what's possible. And who else do we connect to? I've talked about resilience, resistance. And one thing I want to share is, and maybe I'll end with this because I know we have a lot to happen through the day. I'll maybe end with just my own understanding. Again, I didn't have these words or this language when I was 10, 20, 30, probably even 40. But I came to understand that as a child, growing up how I did and what I've shared, is that I survived and I coped for many years by staying compliant to the systems, right? Like, got the good grades, kind of learned the language, the coding of the systems, tried to be as white as I could be, athlete, kind of did all that stuff, right? And there's a point in my life, and I'm so grateful for this, however it happened, was that I realized, like, well, this isn't working for me because I'm depressed, I got ulcers, I'm ready to beat the shit out of anybody, right, and everybody. So there was a point at which I realized, like, this isn't working, and I started doing all the things of acting out, right? All the risky behaviors we're trying to mitigate and stop, I started doing all of that stuff. And I felt better. My ulcers went away. I didn't feel as depressed, right? And I think, again, I'm coming from a place of immense sort of privilege in terms of my material world. Like, I didn't worry about, am I going to have a meal? Am I going to have housing? Like, I didn't worry about all that. There are other things for sure. How is my dad going to come home? What was going to be his mood? How do I sort of prepare for that, right? And at school, from both students and teachers, all kinds of stuff coming at me. But I did sort of, and that's what I realize now, in the place I am, in the proximity I have or don't have to young people I'm working with, how do I understand that those places of compliance and coping can be cages? for our young people? And how do we help sort of shift and understand that to be liberatory means to not only eliminate the cages, but to dream sort of, again, that sense of beloved community. So I'm going to stop there. Thank you for your time. Look forward to being in the day with you, and all my love.
So I'm working in the thick of some really harmful, oppressive, institutional garbage, and have been trying to make space for conversations that matter and that I feel are disrupting the culture of where we are. And I also feel like that's not enough. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts about being in a place that's not at all like the Ryse Center, how you could dismantle and resist and disrupt. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. I also want to thank you and everyone who's in those systems. I want to say we need you in those systems. We need all those levels of disruption. I have a lot of privilege and I'm honored to work at a place that is sanctuary for me, right? So if I'm somewhere and it's feeling kind of, I need to go home, that also means Ryse. So I also want to acknowledge that. And to your question, when I hear you say it's not enough, I'm wondering it's not enough for you, it's not enough for the folks you're in service to. But what I want to say is that those pieces of disruption, if we understand this is legacy work, right? That what you're putting out there, that energy, I know in the moment, it's like, is this shit gonna change? And it can feel deflating and disappointing. So who are you going to nourish, to replenish, right? For those of us who are really doing that work, I mean, it is absolutely necessary to replenish and nourish. And I say that as someone who's not good at it, okay? But I know that that's important. And I need people to hold me accountable to that just as much as they're holding me accountable to getting the funder report done. Like that is necessary. So I think a colleague of mine talked about finding those fugitive places in these systems and in these, like, so whether it's the person, who's the person you go to, what's the practice you engage in to fortify yourself, right? At Ryse, it's an amazing place, and it's hard to work at Ryse. It's not easy. It requires a lot of stamina. It requires a sense of really knowing kind of what are my own triggers, or not even my triggers, but what presses me. So we have to also make sure and remind our own team, there's a lot we can do and we'll try to do at Ryse, but there's also stuff you have to figure out. We can help you figure that out, but it has to get figured out. So it's who fortifies you, what fortifies you, where are those fugitive spaces and places, and thank you, because we need to keep doing that. And what I know is that seed is planted, right? That's the thing. I mean, I have to remember that. So I hope that's helpful.
My name is Courtney Jamila Lee, and I'm a mental health first aid trainer, and I also work with an organization called SNDP. But I've come to some trainings at Ryse. I'm a big fan of the organization. And when I was listening to you speak, I actually was thinking a lot about nonprofit culture in general, and I don't know how often people really talk about the environment and structure of nonprofits and how they actually are oppressive and limiting to people of color, and how power and privilege and positions really play out. So I was curious about your thoughts and maybe some of the experiences your organization has had in addressing that, and then also whether it was in a training capacity, and then how do you manage the power dynamics that do naturally occur between adults and youth, and the discomfort that can come from adults, needing to check themselves at, many opportunities to be able to work in real partnership with young people.
Thank you. So yeah, Ryse is a 501c3. We are part of the nonprofit industrial complex. We made an intentional decision. We know nonprofits are buffers to maintain capitalism, right? So we know that nothing is pure, right? So understanding that, and we made an intentional choice to be a 501c3 because both we are proximate to our communities, but what our communities and as the young people have told us is, we need you to also help us deal with the systems that harm us. So we also need to be proximate to those systems. Right? So that is the structure we chose, that we felt like we could do that in, and we struggle every day, we grapple with it. That said, part of what I think is important, you've been to the learning series, is also then how do we, as those of us working in nonprofits and community organizations, also come together to tend to ourselves, right? Because in our work, we're not supposed to ever be wrong, right? We're supposed to know everything. We're supposed to get it done right away. And that's impossible. So what we do when something goes wrong, the first thing we do is look, who do we blame it on, right? Or what mechanism wasn't working? So how do we come into it in a way that we're going to do our best, we're going to tend to each other, we're a learning organization. We make mistakes all the time. But it's a place to figure out, like, that's got to happen. If we're trying to rebuild relationships, we're going to stumble. In terms of the some of the practices we have in place, so all of our staff are interviewed by young people. And so, but we're also clear, while they're not the formal final decision maker, it is rare that we've never hired someone that young people aren't really feeling. We have hired people that the adults weren't feeling, but the young people were, right? So some of those practices in place, right? All of our programs are vetted by young people before they go, like if there's outside partners that are coming in, so then they can say, this is what worked, this is what didn't. And we've had folks that we've had to say, they're not feeling it, right? But what it is then is an opportunity, we hope, with the partner to say, here's what we think could be helpful. Maybe next season we can try this out. So we are as clear as we can around what is decision making. We're also, the role of adults is also like, we do need to provide some structure and direction and decisions for and with young people, but always in transparency. So if we might need to call child welfare, right? That's never happens without a conversation with the young person. And usually the young person's in the room on the call with us. So those kinds of practices. And that said, I will also say things do happen at Ryse where staff feel like, well, you guys weren't really clear. Why didn't you tell us everything? I can't always share personnel stuff, right? So that's the other piece too, wanting to be clear, like, here's the structure and the system we're in. We're gonna be as transparent as we can and where we need to be, but also I wanna respect people's sort of own sort of stories and needs. And so that also comes up too. So those are some of the practices in place, but I do think as sort of nonprofits, we again are beholden to these metrics that don't actually work for anybody, right? It's about everyone becoming good middle-class white people, and even middle-class white folks can't occupy that, right? So, but the risk and the retaliation when we don't is much greater. So that's some of the pieces when we bring folks together, like in the learning series, which I hope everyone will get on the listserv for, and we engage in those kind of ways. It's the big I, like the institutional, but also the sort of little I, the interpersonal and the individual. Like how do we have to do that all together.
I just want to thank you for coming and especially addressing the stigma of us with mental health issues and the historical trauma. I've had the great pleasure of working with your organization in the past, but as us in the historical trauma of being taught to appear white and not having the privilege of understanding the history that we come from, but the loss that has occurred, you know, as we transition and are taught to look perfectly appeared so that we are not looked down on, but then look snooty for, you know, it's like you pass, don't pass. So we've been taught you're not allowed to be angry. So I've never known how to be angry. I just know how to be sad. But then you're not supposed to be sad either. It's like suck it up, pretend everything's fine. So I want to thank you, and I do keep learning, but as transitioning from the younger year to the elder year and trying to reach back and bring the next generation up that we've had the privilege of getting into their 30s, I'd like to know if you have any comments. And I'll close with the fact that I also agree that the music in the beginning helps because my system is in conflict for getting over the trauma of what I sleep with and rise back to, and then trying to sit and pay attention. So I find that very helpful. But if you could give me any comment or guidance you have on transitioning back into school, because I think I learned to a certain level the past and present are in collision with one another, and I find that to be a great challenge. Thank you.
Thank you. Comes to mind for me, as you talked about, sort of the transitioning back, like, so working with young people. So I named some of the practices we have in place, right? So I don't like social media. That is everywhere young people are, right? So I'm probably not the one to run our social media communication platform, but I am the one to ensure, like, however we're sort of sharing our work and whatever my role is, I connect with those who are, right? And that it's young people driving it, but we actually have a team that addresses it. You know, for us, why it's also important is, like I said, 1/3 of our staff have come up through our membership. The idea is that, you know, a member will be in my role, right? But it's also about building loving power in which young people of color are running city council, the school board, the city, right? So we're building kind of that movement. And part of our work as a nonprofit is one thing we've done is we just asserted a theory of liberation. So many nonprofits have, you know, theories of change, what's your logic model, et cetera, your outcomes. So ours is about having a theory of liberation. So again, we are in relationship to intersecting movements, right? And this is the role we have and what we play, but it has to be in relationship. So that's one way also, like at a larger level. And then what I will say, because I do get a chance to teach like every few semesters at San Francisco State, is I had to come to this myself as a graduate student that was really grappling with academia and all that it means. But that my success in school or with school is not about my liberation. I can go through all of it, and I don't know if there's students in here right now, but you know, there's things we have to do to show we can pass muster to get through this system, and that's great. That's like, I'm not minimizing it, but it's not equivalent to liberation. And so we have to think about, where's my success, where's my liberation, where do they align, and where am I have to do more work, what do I have to let go of, right? So I was like, F it, I'll get C's on everything because this is the thesis I want to focus on, and I'm not going to go to my other classes. But that was a decision I made. I'm not saying you should make that, but I'm saying that you have to figure out, like, what are the places you're going to give up and give into when we're thinking about that success and liberation. And for some of us, it's going to be harder. For some of us, we're not going to want to do it. But I actually believe there's more of us who do than don't. Thank you. Thank you.
Can we give our keynote speaker a bigger round of applause than that? All right, woo, she was just so succinct and amazing.